Opinion about mass immigration seems to be changing right across the Western world. My advice is don't get too excited about that. In particular, don't let Keir Starmer's shiny face and butch pronouncements elate you. They're probably not all they seem. They may actually work out the opposite way. What he said is what I want to play. I want to play a little bit of here. That speech he made, Keir Starmer on immigration, Tories ran open borders experiment. Let me play a few seconds of that now.
Because a failure on this scale isn't just bad luck, it isn't a global trend or taking your eye off the ball. No, this is a different order of failure. This happened by design, not accident. Policies were reformed deliberately to liberalise immigration. Brexit was used for that purpose, to turn Britain into a one-nation experiment in open borders. Global Britain. Remember that slogan? That is what they meant. A policy with no support and which they then pretended wasn't happening. And now they want to wave it away with a simple, we got it wrong. Well, that's unforgivable. And mark my words, this government will turn the page.
That's pretty sound stuff, and it appears to prove me wrong when I predicted, say 4 or 5 months ago, that the total inflows of immigrants could hit 2 million a year. I based that on Rishi Sunak's boast that if we let in enough immigrants and charge them £2,000 for the health services they would receive, then we could make 4 billion out of that. So 4 billion divided by 2,000, that's 2 million. So that was, I thought, that's an aim. That's not him setting that as a ceiling. That is a goal that he wants to achieve. And if he wants to achieve that, I think other politicians are likely to want to achieve that. So Starmer appears to be giving the lie to that rash prediction of mine, but maybe that's not the case. Excitement about what Starmer said is increased by what's going on, what other governments are saying, what other people in other countries are saying. Here's a couple of stories. Austria stops processing Syrian asylum applications after Assad falls, basically saying, well, he's gone, you fear persecution from him. Now he's gone, that the brutal dictatorship in Syria is no longer there, so you can't be in fear for your lives. So we're not going to allow you to apply for asylum. And this one here, Sweden told people to open their hearts to immigrants 10 years ago. Its U-turn has been dramatic, and it talks about Sweden is often viewed as a liberal utopian Europe known for its stable economy, high quality of life, open and progressive society, but its centre-right coalition has adopted an increasingly restrictive stance on immigration. The country is trumpeting lower numbers of immigrants, but economists say the economic benefits are debatable, etc. And I think that there's also a story saying that Sweden achieved net negative immigration last year. So a lot of migrants came in, but a lot of other people left, and more people left than came in. And so this is apparently that is hopeful news. Well, I wouldn't be quite so sure. I would take that with a pinch of salt. I think immigration is too valuable to the authorities. At bottom, I think what it offers, as I've said before, is an opportunity for them to increase their power, for the people who are in power and who crave power to get more of it by reducing our power, by dividing us, taking away our sense of identity, our sense of togetherness, making us more dependent, more poor, dependent on them for welfare, dependent on them for protection from the crime that they're importing. And that is useful to them. That dependence means we're less likely to turn on them, we're more likely to rely on them and to turn to them. And so I think politicians are going to be quite unwilling to let go of mass immigration. Just to remind you that the numbers are high. If you look at this chart, that's from a BBC story about how the numbers migrating to the UK got increased, got adjusted upward recently, up to June 2024, what they're in fact saying is that the total number coming in was about 1.3 million, and the total net migration was about slightly over 900,000, nearly a million. So 1.3 million coming in, that's 2/3 of the way there to the 2 million number that I predicted. And these are the people, again, this is from a BBC News story, if I go all the way up, that's how many people came to the UK and how have the rules changed, etc. There it shows that huge number, 1.3 million, and then we go down to, if I can get down there, all the way down, that's who's coming in. You can see it's all non-EU migrants. Right from 2019, that's when Johnson came into power, suddenly under the Tories, the gates were opened to Africans, Muslims and Indians, basically. That's who's coming in, not people from the EU, not British people returning. Now, I don't think we should take Starmer's words at face value. The reason I don't is I think he's dishonest. I think he's a power-hungry politician. I think he's a bit of a thug. I think he's a bit thick. And there's something a bit wrong with him. But it's not only that. I think that butch macho statement he has made, that's in line with two other butch macho statements he has made, which I think are made with the intention of maintaining high levels of immigration by giving a little bit of red meat to people who are not paying attention. So football cuck patriots, that kind of person. And the two things that he's referred to are, firstly, his macho tough guy promise to smash the gangs like Hulk smash, and the second one is to increase deportations or returns, I think. But I think that they call them deportations. And again, that is macho tough guy stuff. We're not going to have any sympathy for you. We're going to put you straight on a plane. That's what they want to do. I think the people they're trying to appeal to are people who don't have enough interest in politics to be attracted to reform, but might be interested in reform because reform politicians tend to talk loudly and crudely and to go on about woke stuff and to do Nigel Farage's nonsense, basically, promising tough guy words over anything of substance. And that's what they're doing, and that's people who like that are the people they're hoping to appeal to. But if you look at those promises are in fact irrelevant in that, first of all, smashing the gangs, you can smash 100 gangs and still have the rubber dinghy invasion going at full pelt, at full blast, and increasing and growing, with the line still going near vertical. So those the numbers making that crossing could go up and up and up, even though you are smashing lots of gangs. And as regards deporting people, the numbers are tiny, and you can deporting lots of people doesn't mean that you're reducing the inflow of people coming in. So I think they're deliberately, cynically focusing on side issues as a way to take attention away from what matters, numbers of people coming in. This is an answer he gave to a question saying, why haven't you included reducing immigration as one of your milestones? Why aren't you prepared to set a target for it?
Beth, the way we've constructed this is that there are foundational things that a government must do, and they are based on security. So national security is obvious, but border security is equally obvious in my view, and that's why I've said we are committed to bringing down immigration, both legal and illegal.
If people are really concerned about migration, there is no measurable, there's nothing on the banners. What on earth is going on? I think that could come back to bite you, couldn't it?
Well, we've had record numbers of people deported that shouldn't have been here, over 9,000 since we got...
Top priority for the public, and nothing on them. Why is it not a milestone on which the public can measure you if it is such a priority for this government, which apparently Keir Starmer keeps telling me it is? It doesn't make sense.
Well, it's the underpinnings of everything else we do. So it's clearly, therefore, a central priority for the government and certainly for me as Home Secretary.
First, there were 5 missions.
So good on that Beth Rigby woman for embarrassing those politicians. You saw their responses there. Starmer saying, well, obviously. Here's a hint. When someone says obviously, they mean no. They mean stop going on about it. You're being obvious. Shut up. And that's what he means. And it's foundational. That means it's so important. It's so important. We're not going to measure it. We're not going to set a target on it. We're not going to make any promises on it because it's so important. It would be vulgar and just out of place to give some kind of target. And then you saw the second one, what's her name, that Deputy Rayner, saying that we've deported all these people. Exactly, that's not the issue. Deportations are not the same as total numbers coming in. And then you heard the third, Yvette Cooper, saying, yes, it's so important to me. Again, we can't set a target on it. That's what they're doing. That's a giveaway. And that goes right across the board. They've had that from, there's this other minister here, this fellow McFadden. If I play this little bit where he's talking to Trevor Phillips, I'll play a little bit of that, because it's amusing watching them tell their lies.
One of your missions.
Targets haven't worked very well, but we've got things we're saying about this in terms of getting net migration down.
You're about to tell me about a load of new targets. So you can't start the answer by saying targets don't work.
I don't say targets don't work in any circumstances, but numerical targets on migration have not had a happy history in recent years.
So numerical targets don't have a happy history. No, they just don't want to commit to that. I think there is reason for that. And even on the rubber dinghy invasion, they're not prepared to give a target or a timeline. There's this story from Sky News, Yvette Cooper, more migrants. She's boasting about the number of migrants that have been removed in such a short space of time, more than has happened in the last few years. The Home Office announced today, that's the 15th of December, a couple of weeks ago, that almost 13,500 people have been removed since the July 4th general election, and so they're on track to deliver its pledge to return more people who do not have the right to stay in the UK. So their promise is simply to return more than were returned under the previous government. What I find interesting is her slight petulance about being asked for a timeline, being asked to make a commitment. She said she's not going to say, I can get out a magic wand and wave it and it'll all be okay in 5 months. No one's saying that. She just doesn't want to give a commitment. No one's asking for a magic wand, as she refused to give a timeline for getting the numbers arriving on small boats down. And just so you know, those numbers are more than 36,000 over the year. That's the number that came out today, up a quarter on last year. And the National Crime Agency said it had 70 live investigations into organised immigration crime or human trafficking. And Starmer is getting butch and macho. Look at this, Dudley News of all things. Starmer plans to treat people smugglers like terrorists to cut crossings. So this is showmanship. This has very little substance. He's going to treat them like terrorists. And what he said is, we're going to treat people smugglers like terrorists, so we're taking our approach to counter-terrorism, which we know works, and applying it to the gangs well. He also stressed that international agreements matter. Those are the two methods. He wants more surveillance, more police work, and he wants international agreements. I'll come to those in a minute. And what this means is set out in this North Edinburgh News report. Starmer unveils, and this was at the time of that Dudley News report, Starmer unveils game-changing investments to tackle national security threat from people smuggling gangs. And what it comes down to is this. So basically it's a big funding boost for more coppers and more tech. Major funding boost for the government's new Border Security Command will initially be directed towards a range of enforcement and intelligence activity, including, and you get a lot of official jargon here, just nonsense, hot air. So, investing heavily in NCA, that's National Crime Authority, I think, technology and capabilities, delivering advanced data exploitation and improvements to technologies to boost collaboration with European partners to investigate blah-de-blah-de. What that means is cameras, so body-worn cameras and drones, and giving them to other countries, like Bulgaria, places like that who are on the front line, to try and get them, to help them to do our dirty work for us to help them stop the people getting smuggled through their countries and into Britain. And so it is not, despite the way that sounds, you might think that's AI bots and automated surveillance equipment. No, it's drones and cams, low tech. Okay, and the 300 staff for the Border Security Command, who will strengthen global partnerships, deliver new legislation. No, they can't deliver legislation, Parliament does that, and lead the system through investment and strategy, whatever that means. So it'll strengthen global partnerships. That means talking to other police forces. That's what that means. That's not 300 of those talking to half a dozen different governments. That's going to be about 50 each. It's not going to achieve very much, given how big and porous the border is. 100 specialist investigators and intelligence officers for the National Crime Association, dedicated to tackling criminals who facilitate people smuggling. And to create new specialist, I think that's organised immigration crime intelligence source units, which will cohere intelligence flows from key police forces. They'll ring around the different police authorities and say, hey, who have you arrested? What have you got? Give us a lead. And boosting Crown Prosecution Service's ability to deliver charging decisions more quickly on international organised crime cases. So giving them a bit of money and a kick up the bum, saying assess those cases quickly. We want them in the pipeline faster. Now that is not going to amount to much, given the scale of the problem. It's not going to work. And I think, and any fool, even Starmer, must realise that. I think this is theatre, it's pantomime. I think everything around the rubber dinghy invasion is pantomime. The rubber dinghy invasion is about between 2 and 3% of total numbers coming into this country, but it attracts a lot of public attention. So, and if they can keep public attention focused on that, they can get busy with that hand, and then with the left hand they can carry on waving in more than 1 million. I think eventually 2 million non-Europeans every year. I think that's what they're trying to do. This is misdirection. It's a bit of three-card Monty. Now, why is it going to fail? Why is it obvious it's going to fail? Well, this report from The Guardian a couple of months ago, Monday, 18th of November, or 7 weeks ago, Monday briefing, the reason Keir Starmer's Smash the Gang slogan is doomed to fail. I think there are various reasons that it goes to. I think probably the main reasons are this. What they're saying is, if simply increasing law enforcement resources was the answer, i.e. spending more money and giving it to foreign police forces, smuggling would have been solved a decade ago. Suba, he's a researcher, this Suba fella. I don't know who he is. You might be able to have an operation which arrests people today, but in 3 or 4 months, others will take over. These are not complicated operations to run. No, they're not. You get a rubber dinghy, you pump it up, you get a load of people who've paid you $3,000 a time, and at some stage, when the beach is clear, you all run down to the beach, chuck the dinghy into the water. That is not complicated. I'd say that's easier than running a whelk stall. They're opportunistic groups that keep on shifting according to the availability of the people to run them. Of course, if those people are migrating themselves and get caught, once they made it to the UK, their arrest does little to impact the wider problem. Even in France, we've seen an increase in arrests as the French have stepped up their operations on the north coast, but it hasn't substantively changed the numbers. That is the point. You can have lots of arrests, as many arrests as you like. You can smash as many gangs in as macho and tough guy a way as you like. That won't directly reduce the number of people coming across. And there are very good reasons why it won't have any effect at all. It might even increase the numbers coming across. I think it won't have any effect, but it's possible that it could increase the numbers. And I think this is the key bit. Because the gangs are so loosely affiliated and informal, they adapt very quickly to new threats to their business model, Suba added. Now, what it seems to be is a bunch of Kurds, say a couple of Kurdish brothers, they recruit or press gang some poverty-stricken buddies into it, and if a couple of their buddies get caught, doesn't matter, they can carry on, and they do. And if those brothers get caught, there are plenty of others who want to take their place because it's a big business. France estimates it's 150 million euros a year. I think it's probably more than that. Anyway, We saw that with the way that lorry crossings were made unviable, and so people started coming by boat. If you surveil all the beaches in the north of France 24/7, it is likely that they will simply start from further away and actually increase the risk for those making the journey. Now that's not a bad article to read, but basically it's saying that those gangs, they're so loose and informal, it's like trying to grab jelly in the bath. You just can't get a grip on it, and I think that's what's happening. That's what we've seen with this year's figures. More and more prosecutions, more money getting spent on policemen, and the number 25% higher than last year. This is an article I found from Global Initiative. Don't know who they are. No, it's a horrible name, but they could be okay. Small boats, big business. The point they make that they spoke to some smugglers. And this is a good paragraph here, where what it says here is, according to one smuggler based in Germany, a smuggling network tends to consist of between 8 and 12 people. The kingpin usually lives in another country, together with a trusted person who controls the network for the kingpin. Some smugglers continue to operate their networks from inside prison, often having smuggled in a mobile phone. So that's how complicated it is. You need a mobile phone. That's your overhead cost. That's your capital upfront cost. On the French coast, the other network members are assigned functions. 3 or 4 to guide the migrants to the entry point, i.e. to say, right, we're going tonight, we're going from that stretch of beach down there. Okay, on my word, go, run down to the beach. Another 3 or 4 to take care of logistics, so that's people who carry the rubber dinghy and pump it up, involving transport transporting the boat engines, hulls and fuel to the launching point. The rest work as guards. That's, I think, significant. Monitoring the area for rival networks, so rival gangs and law enforcement agents. It is a highly lucrative business, with one source estimating that smuggling networks can earn more than $1 million, approximately 920,000 euros a month. Xavier Delrieux, head of the French Office for the Fight Against the Illicit Trafficking of Migrants, estimated that the value of the migrant smuggling industry in 2022 was 150 million. That's probably about right. 50,000 people, 3,000 euros a go. I'd have thought it was a bit more than 3,000 euros, but that comes to about 150 million. If you're a Kurd from Iraq or maybe Syria, I mean, that's just untold billions to you. So that's how they operate. That's how ad hoc and loose and how you can't get hold of them, but basically. And if you arrest someone, say someone down on the beach who's pumping up the rubber dinghy, or who's opening the door of a lorry to let people out, if you arrest him, you can boast about smashing a gang. All you've done is to get some mule arrested, who was probably doing it so that in a month's time he'd be allowed to go on the dinghy free of charge. So you're not really... So it's very unlikely to work. Smashing the gangs doesn't smash the gangs. Mr. Big, he's back in Kurdistan or in Turkey, more likely. And this is illustrated by this story, and that is man suspected of supplying boats to people smugglers arrested in Amsterdam. A suspected supplier of hundreds of small boat engines used by people smugglers to transport asylum seekers across the Channel has been arrested in Amsterdam. A 44-year-old Turkish national was arrested on Wednesday after arriving at Schiphol Airport. The UK's National Crime Agency said the suspect was due to be extradited to Belgium to face charges of being involved in human trafficking. Okay, so you don't need to be a business genius to work out, if the guy supplying you outboard motors gets arrested, you can find someone else who supplies outboard motors. They're probably manufactured in China, maybe South Korea, probably not in Japan anymore, and there's an endless supply of them. It's not hard to get those across the border. It's not hard to find another supplier of those. And yet Starmer he was boasting and bragging, pulling his tough guy face about this. This illustrates my point. You can arrest as many people involved in the rubber dinghy trade as you want, but that is very unlikely to affect the rubber dinghy invasion, and it has nothing whatever to do with the mass legal invasion, which is about 40 or 50 times higher coming into the country. This is misdirection. It is a con. It is a ruse. Well, I want to play you this what Starmer had to say about it. So let me go to the next tab.
It is good news that today a man suspected of being a significant supplier of small boat equipment has been arrested. Criminal gangs have been getting away with this for far too long. I want to thank the UK National Crime Agency, along with their Dutch and Belgian counterparts, for all their hard work and their crucial role in this investigation. It's exactly what we want to see. And it shows that our approach of working with international partners to smash the people smuggling gangs is bearing fruit. In just over 4 months since the election, we've rapidly set up a new border security command, bringing together key agencies to disrupt people smuggling gangs.
Okay, so that's a major piece of the jigsaw. Absolute nonsense. That was November 14th. In the seven weeks since then, the numbers have only gone up and up and up. I mean, the busiest December for the rubber dinghy invasion. So it has had no effect whatever. It will have no effect. He must know that. It can't work. It will never work. That smashing the gangs, it's not going to happen even on its own terms. Even if it did, it wouldn't make any difference, and that would have nothing to do with the numbers coming in, the much bigger numbers coming in legally. And one big reason why it can't work is that the numbers coming in are not limited by the number of people who want to get into that very lucrative business. There are loads of people willing to step in and make a fortune. It's limited by the geography of the coast. Who can get the prime spots, the best pitches for getting people into the water and out of sight of the coast or away from the coast, so that they can get over the halfway mark, where they then get picked up by the British Border Force taxi service, ferrying them into Britain into a hotel. Now, I've got a few stories about this. Let me show you this one. This is from, these are quite old stories. What they illustrate is that these gangs are fighting each other. They're shooting each other over turf because they want to control this trade. So there are more gangs than there are beaches or points at which they can get their rubber dinghies into the sea. So if you take out another gang, or if you take up one of those gangs, all you are doing is working for the other gang. Starmer, with his smash the gangs policy, he works for whichever gangs he doesn't smash, because he's not going to smash them all, and he makes it more profitable for them. And that, incidentally, if he gets rid of their competition, that reduces costs for the other gangs, because they're not having to employ so much security, which would seem to me they could then reinvest to be able to get more people over, or else to reduce their prices in order to increase numbers, increase demand. So I think it could be counterproductive. What I want to do is show you a few stories from the last 6-7 years, showing how showing fights between migrant gangs. So France, this one is from 2018. France sends police as migrant gangs clash in Calais. But let me go to the next one. And that one there. Now, I don't have a subscription to the Times, so I'll just read you this one. This is July 2022. Gunfight between Channel smugglers. Rival smuggling gangs in northern France are becoming increasingly violent in their battle for dominance over camps, with migrants forced to, whatever that is they're forced to do, don't know, don't care. So that is that's basically saying that the smuggling gangs, they're getting very violent towards each other. They're competing for turf. And you can see it in this next one here. Another one from the Times. I had a subscription. It's no good. I don't recommend it. Rubbish. Wind in the ears. Waste of money. Waste of time as well. People smuggling gangs in gun battle at Dunkirk camp. That's 2016. Tensions at a migrants camp in northern France have increased after a gunfight between people smuggling gangs against what police said was, well, whatever it was. But it's a gunfight between people smuggling gangs. So they're going at each other, fighting for turf. So if you take one out, there'll still be plenty there. You just clear the floor for them to operate a little bit more freely. And another one here. This one, that is from February of last year. Ethnic rivalries are often blamed when migrants get killed on the border, but sometimes it's a war over turf. So if I go down a bit, what it says, bear with me a second. There, that's the bit. Sometimes those struggles turn deadly. Since 1999, 25 homicide victims have been recorded in the area. That's recorded. Some, but not all, have been over turf. And then this headline here, turf wars. And bear with me again. This shows a little bit about their MO, why it's so you just can't smash the gangs. You can think you're arresting people, putting them in jail, but you're not smashing the gangs. Being a people smuggler meant keeping watch, checking the truck's destination, opening and closing the trailer door, all as discreetly as possible. And this is one of the French policemen talking here. And he said they risked being arrested, tried in immediate appearance and sentenced to 6 to 9 months imprisonment. Every time the authorities arrested a man who was closing a truck door, they had the impression of having dismantled a network, Boyer said. In fact, the police had at best arrested 2 men. That says nothing about a potential network. And it goes on to say, hold on, bear with me again. So it was at this point that, on the volunteer side, we started talking about door closers rather than smugglers, Boyer said. Once in the UK, people would call to inform those who had stayed in that French town, and word would then spread to Calais for others to try their luck from the Saint-Hilaire area. Now, what they're saying is that they stopped talking about smugglers, just door closers. I think what that means is a couple of mules who are sent down to open the doors, let people out, get the rubber dinghy at the back of the truck. So what that shows is that emphasises that you're not smashing a gang. And this one from Arab News, Iraqi migrants shot amid people smuggling gang fight in France. Now that is from May 2022. I think it's a different story from the others. 2 hospitalised after gunfire erupts between rival groups in Dunkirk. This one makes the picture seem even more grim. This is from LBC, how I infiltrated one of the biggest people smuggling rings in northern France. So if you look down here, I find this quite amusing. I think it's that fella there, I think that's the one they're referring to. Remarkably, he told us that the authorities were in on the scheme. That means the French authorities. He said that there was collusion with the French police, immigration authorities and Coast Guard. He said they help us, they know we're here, they tell us tonight is a good night, they help us with papers. They also warn them when it's not a good night to get passengers out of France, when the drones are up or patrols are out. At the very least, they are turning a blind eye. At worst, they are actively helping them. So incidentally, I believe that. What I suspect, that's not French bashing. I like the French. What that is what I'm told, or what I was told about 10, 12 years ago by a French guy who was involved in the French counter-jihad. He said he couldn't do public talks without getting arrested, so he started to do talks in private houses, private homes, where people could also turn up anonymously and listen. And he said a lot of the people in his audience were people from the Gendarmerie Nationale, the security police, who are actually they're the police who are part of the military, sort of militarised police. They operate nationally. They're the mob-handed people, coppers that you see cracking skulls when there are Paris demos. Now those guys, what he told me is that what really irritated them is they had invaders forced into their ranks, and what that meant was when they were going out to knock over a drug gang or a drug house, if they had a preparation meeting before where they say, right, you knock on the front door, you knock on the back door, and then you send the dogs in, what they would find is when they got there, the place would have been cleared out at the last minute. And it was what they believed is it was because of the invaders who had been forced to take on, for diversity reasons, were contacting the drug gangs and giving them a heads up. And so what they were then reduced to is to have informal meetings with no invaders present, where that last about 30 seconds in a corridor, just saying, this is what we're going to do. Everyone got the message right, let's go. And that was the only way. They had to exclude the invaders amongst them in order to do a successful raid, because the invaders would inform the people they were going to arrest. I suspect that in this story here, I reckon that the people, if that's the guy, the people informing the smugglers are probably invaders who get jobs working in those areas, working for the French police, working for immigration authorities, and for the Coast Guard. It's probably quite lucrative. You probably get a nice little backhander as well. Finally, I found this story from the BBC saying that Starmer will struggle to keep his smash the gangs promise, as I saw firsthand. I won't read through this article, but basically what it's saying is how everyone who's in all the people involved in this work trying to smash the gangs would never talk about smashing the gangs or stopping the boats. The most they would talk about is making it a bit more difficult, hindering them, because they know you can't smash the gangs. Although there is one good bit from this article where they speak to a Bulgarian fella. He's a Bulgarian policeman policing the border, and what this article says is, certainly the Bulgarians have made strides in policing their side of the border. In recent years they have installed cameras, drones, and ramped up the number of security staff. And then what this Bulgarian copper says, Rusev, in order to police you need thousands of people on the ground. You cannot put a man every 5 meters, so you have these patrols that are moving across certain sections of the border. Then you have the fence, when the fence is not a big obstacle because you need a simple wooden ladder. He says, smuggling gangs are clever and know the terrain very well, he explains. If you think that you can stop these irregular flows just with policing and prosecution and securitizing, he means the cameras and drones that probably we have paid for. It is a road to nowhere. And that's him. That's the guy, Bulgarian guy on the front line, calling it a road to nowhere. Now, I've been labouring the point a bit, but what I've been trying to do is to show there is no way that this promise of smashing the gangs is going to work. I can see Starmer getting a few scouts and waving them about, like that Turkish fellow who supplied outboard motors, and saying there'll be no more outboard motors anywhere for anyone. I can see him doing that repeatedly, but it just won't have any effect, and he must know that. And I think that is why that promise is being made, not to reduce immigration, not even to stop the rubber dinghy invasion, but to make the gangs hurt, to hit back. That appeals to stupid people who want to lash out rather than solve the problem. That's why I think he is saying that. And I think the same motivation is behind Starmer saying immigration was too high. The Tories conducted an open borders experiment. That macho talk is Starmer trying to appeal to people who want to lash out without promising anything, or studiously avoiding promising anything. So, and that brings me to the second promise they're making, which is that they're going to increase returns. Again, that is irrelevant to the ongoing invasion that we suffer. So you have this story, more migrants removed, this is 2 weeks ago, 15th December, removed from UK since Labour elected than in any 6 months since 2019, Home Office says. That's a big boast. So any 6 months for 5 years. So actually that's not that high in historical terms. It has been quite a lot higher. You have to go, if you go back more than 5 years. So the Home Office said it is on track to deliver on Labour's pledge to remove more migrants from the UK in its first 6 months in power than during any other 6 month period, etc., etc. Now, bear with me. So the headline number is almost 13,500 people removed in it's about five and a half months since the election, and so that's about 27,000 per year, I would guess. And what that means is shown here in this report. That I think what they're referring to is returns. So you have three types of return. One is enforced returns. That's basically what the deportations we normally think of, where people are forced onto an aeroplane and flown back to their country of origin. The other one is administrative removal. That's where sort of legal administrative proceedings, formal proceedings are taken, and then you're given a judgment saying you've got to leave now, and they go perhaps with a free airplane ticket. You don't have to force them onto an airplane. And then you get voluntary returns. That's where you don't have those formal proceedings, but the Home Office writes to you and says, you're not supposed to be here, you outstayed your visa, you need to go now, and they then go. Again, perhaps with a free airplane ticket from the state. And then there's port returns, where someone turns up with a fake passport for the 10th time in a row, and you say, no, you're going back, you're flying back to Nigeria, you're flying back to Pakistan. So I think what they're talking about is enforced returns and voluntary returns. I think that's where because, hold on, if I go, oh dear, what she's talking about is 13,500 people have been removed. I think that's returned. So that's what I'm guessing it is. Now, those numbers, though, are tiny. If you compare those numbers, hold on, to, if I go back to there, that is total people coming in, total arrivals, 1.3 million. 13,000, I make that to be, 13,500, I make that to be about 1%. So removals are 1% of the total number who come in legally. It is completely trivial. And what they're trying to say is, when they're asked about their commitment, you saw that with Rayner, where she was when she was asked, why aren't you setting a target number for immigration? She says, look how many people we've removed. That's the purpose of that pledge. So they can sound like they're serious, so they can appeal to people who don't care, don't know, but who just want to lash out a bit. Football cucks, that kind of person. That's who they're appealing to. Now, the reason I think I think they might reduce immigration for a year or two by a small amount. I think it's quite likely they will increase it again. And you only if let me show you this picture again. There. What I said is that at some stage, I reckon the aim is to have 2 million people a year coming in. That might seem like an absurd number, but actually we are already 2/3 of the way there. 1.3 million is 2/3 of the way there. And so that number coming in, the net number went up 4 times in about 3 years, and the total number doubled, roughly almost doubled in about 3 years. So I think it's not beyond the bounds of possibility that that total number could go up by another 50% in another 3 or 4 years. I actually think that's still more likely than not. And I think there's good reason why government would want to do it, because it fulfills, it meets a lot of objectives. The main underlying one is it is good for people in power. So both parties, it's like a semi-monopoly where they coordinate. They basically look at each other and say, listen, let's not cut each other's throats. We can grind down the population, and that means there's just more power going around for us to get our hands on. Whoever wins, if you win or I win, even if we lose, it means we get more power because the population is more ground down, more dependent, more poverty-stricken, more divided. It lacks any sense of identity, and that means we who govern, who seek to be, and the whole apparatchik class, we feel more powerful. We have a more secure position. It increases our power. I think that's the main underlying one. Another one is that it gives a very false impression of health in the economy. Not for ordinary people. It doesn't make the economy wealthier. It certainly doesn't make you wealthier. It makes you poorer. But what it does is, if you bring in a lot of people into the economy, if you have 33 million people in jobs, if it's roughly 2% of that number at any time looking for work, those are the numbers. So 2%, that's about 750,000, let's say, who are looking for work. And if you bring in say 750,000 net, if you bring in that number, that increases the people who should be looking for work. That doubles the number of people looking for work, and that is going to have a very sharp effect, downward effect on wages. So that means wages go down. It also means that demand for products increases. The sort of products that big businesses produce. And big businesses are the people that government likes to deal with. They're the people who appear on the main stock market indexes, the FTSE 100. So you will get more demand for big businesses' products, things like clothes, phones, cars, fridges, washing machines, housing, or supermarket produce. There'll be more demand, so they'll be able to sell more and keep their prices up. So big business, it benefits in three ways: cheaper labour, more goods sold, and it can keep their prices higher. And so that means their profits go up. That means their prices on the stock market go up. So government can say, look how the stock market is going up, look how well the economy is doing. And perhaps they can take some of that money out in tax to bribe us with through welfare. So it serves those objectives. There's another really crude aim that it serves here, and that is with, if I go here, that is the difference between GDP and GDP per capita. Now this is from May. I can't find a more recent version of this diagram, that graph. It's from The Spectator, but if I just show that, just isolate the graphic there, that's GDP, that line in blue, and GDP per capita. So GDP per capita is basically productivity, how much each person working is producing, or it's equivalent to that. What you see there is from 2022 up to 2024, GDP per capita has been going down pretty steadily. I think it has risen a bit since then, but I don't think it's quite up to where it was after the pandemic. So what you have, that is, we're actually in an age where with AI and mass technology that everyone's able to use, productivity should be rocketing away. Instead, it's not. It's declining. We're producing less and less. Each employees are producing less and less. But what you see is that GDP has been kept just above that line. They've managed to do that. So if GDP per person is going down, but overall GDP is going up, that is because the population, the number of people, is going up, and that is because of mass immigration. Now, that matters. That is absolutely crucial to a politician, because governments live on borrowed money. They can't live on their day-to-day tax take. They have to borrow money by selling bonds. And for that purpose, they and the people who lend the money, who buy the bonds, they don't care how well each individual citizen is doing, what the standard of living is. What they look at is the economy growing? Is your GDP growing? It's a fake number, that GDP. It just shows how big the pie is, not how much of the pie each person gets. They don't care about that. It's, by analogy, it's as if it's like the politicians are business owners or business managers, and they're going to the bank asking for a loan because they want new offices, let's say. That bank or that lender is not going to say, how well off are your employees, what are their terms and conditions like. That lender, that bank, is simply going to say, is your business making a profit? Is it growing? If they can show that it is, even by a small amount, that bank is probably going to think, well, this business looks like a good bet. If you have several years of decline, as per that red line, so if the population stays steady, and if a business shows years of decline, that lender is going to say, I don't think you're a good bet. You're losing money, you're shrinking, you're losing market share. I don't really want to lend to you anymore. And then what happens is the interest rate goes up and up and up. So with the government, what that would mean is lenders, big institutions or people who want to invest in bonds would look at the British government and say, you're a bad bet. We want to increase the interest rate if we're going to lend money to you. And that is bad news, because then you get into a death spiral where government is then having to pay more interest on its existing debt. It increases its debts, which means that people become less and less willing to lend, so that interest rate goes up more and more. And if the interest rate on bonds goes up, that means the interest rate in the country goes up. So that means interest for business across the economy goes up. That depresses activity in the economy, and it is already depressed. So if GDP per capita stays below that line, I don't know what they can do other than import millions of people, which may have been one of the main reasons that Sunak, the Tories, did it when they were in power, just to try and make up the numbers, to pad out the numbers, to hide the decline, to engage in a load of fakery, to make the numbers look good to lenders. I think that may be what it was about, because they can't. If the economy is shrinking, that's recession. If the economy goes into permanent recession, like quarter after quarter, year after year, that is bad news. That's the beginning of the end, and they can't do that. But I can't stress enough how important it is for the government to keep GDP above that zero growth line, even if only by a tiny bit. And there are loads of other pressures on the economy. For instance, this lady, you recognise her with her budget, key points at a glance. Just look at national insurance. What they did was they increased national insurance by 1.2%, but they reduced the threshold from 9.1 thousand to 5,000. That was the equivalent of a 2% increase in NI on the average salary. So that effectively, if you see that graph, that will come out of productivity. It doesn't. I'm sure Reeves would have said, don't be ridiculous. Increasing national insurance doesn't reduce the amount that each employee produces. Well, actually, it will go back into reducing productivity per head or production per head, because that is 2% that comes out of their pay, or it comes out of the profits that the employer can make. If that 2% went to the employer, that employer might invest it in the business so that the business becomes more efficient, so that productivity increases. Or the employer might simply say, that's great, that's 2% more for me, I'm rich. But what that would do is tempt more people to come into the market because there are profits to be made, and that would then, and that increased competition would be cause pressure for efficiency, and then productivity would increase that way. Just dragging 2% more out of the economy, or out of each employee's wage, or out of what each employer can pay to an employee, that is equivalent indirectly to reducing that red line down by a further 2%. That's a big hit, and I think that's going to. How are they going to make that up? I think they're going to want to do it by increasing the number of people, by ramping up legal immigration again, and that problem has already started. So from just about a week ago, a bit over a week ago, UK economy showed no growth in the last quarter, revised figures showed. So October, November, December, zero growth. What I think is significant is early estimates show that real GDP per head fell by 0.2% in the third quarter of 2024, and is 0.2% lower compared to the same quarter a year ago. So again, if I go back to this pretty picture there, what that shows is that red line is still heading downwards, GDP per head. And I think Starmer, Rayner, whoever's calling the shots, it won't be that lady Reeves. She's smarter than them, but she's weak. It will. I think Starmer or Rayner will say, we're going to plug that gap by importing people. We'll call it the skills gap. Because simply that red line is going down. GDP per head is going down and down and down. And they are desperate not to allow GDP to go down. They don't care that it makes you poorer. They care that it makes GDP look worse. And they have so other few options. So that's from, again, a week ago. UK economy headed for worst of all worlds, CBI warns, as businesses expect fall in activity. And the worst, bear with me, and I'll phone you the worst of all worlds. Okay, Alpesh Puleja, the CBI's interim deputy chief economist, said there is little festive cheer in our latest surveys. That's a survey of the businesses who are members of the CBI, which suggests that the economy is headed for the worst of all worlds. Firms expect to reduce both output and hiring, and price growth expectations are getting firmer. So they're going to produce less, they're going to hire less, and they're going to put the prices up. That is not a situation conducive to high productivity. And they're running out of levers to pull. So the big levers, the big financial levers to pull. The growth versus inflation bind now visible at the Bank of England. This is another story, again, from about 10 days ago. And that's the fellow, he's the governor of the Bank of England. And very few will be surprised by the Bank of England's decision to keep rates on hold. What is more striking is the policy rift that has emerged. 3 members of the rate-setting committee voted to cut rates, while the other 6 opted to keep them as they are. And this is the take-home quote. Inflation is climbing, with underlying pressures proving stubborn, so prices are rising. At the same time, the economy is flatlining, zero growth, and in desperate need of a boost. So, but the problem is, if inflation is going up, they can't just fire up the printing presses and do what they did during COVID, because we saw the inflation that created. And I don't think they can simply print up a load of money and make it available to big banks to lend to get into the economy, because, well, for a couple of reasons. Politically, I don't think people will stand for it. Just bailing out and making banks richer, which is what it does, and also asset holders richer. Secondly, it could create inflation. I'm not sure it is that inflationary, but I suspect businesses won't take it up. There's not the demand. They're cutting production. Why would they take on a loan if the demand isn't there? So the point I'm making is that it may be that mass immigration is the only stimulus, quantitative easing with people, so not QE with money, QE with people, that may be their only option. And it's so satisfying because it meets all those aims. It grinds you down. It makes businesses appear profitable, which makes stock market valuations go higher, which allows the politicians to say, look how successful the economy is under us. And also it enables them to say our GDP is not collapsing. And I think in those terms, the whore will return to the needle. The dog will return to the vomit as far as mass immigration is concerned. They just don't have an option. And I mean, this story here is an example of the desperate measures they're considering. That fellow McFadden, he's the fellow who was talking to Trevor Phillips. He's saying government needs to think like a startup. That's the buzz phrase, startup. It's cool and hip and trendy, says Minister. And a cabinet minister has urged disruptors to join the civil service in a bid to make government think a little bit more like a startup. Now that is drivel, that is rubbish, that is nothing like a startup. With a startup, you either become a billionaire or you go bankrupt, so there is a survival instinct. With civil servants, there isn't. You don't make a billion, you don't go bankrupt. If it all goes wrong, you walk away from it. You get another job somewhere else. You say, well, that was a load of fun. If you get disruptors and people like the ruthless tech charlatans going into the civil service, they'll just run up huge losses because no one's accountable. They're not spending their own money. They're not going to get anything out of it. It is that shows how stupid that man is. I mean, it's the stupidest idea you can think of. All you'll get is disastrous projects that waste a lot of public money. And but Starmer I suspect the reason this fella is saying it is because stupid Starmer thinks it's a good idea. He loves that idea. It sounds so hip and trendy to him because he's a bit of a dunce, Starmer. Starmer throws down gauntlet to watchdogs with growth edict. I found this quite funny. What it says is one regulatory source said this weekend that the letter to watchdogs, so Starmer has sent out a letter to I think more than 10 regulatory agencies, and that letter calls for a wider drive for regulatory reform emanating from Downing Street, and it was said that they are the brainchild of Varun Chandra, never heard of him, why has he got influence in our country, the PM's special advisor on business and investment. Sakir's letter is understood to have referred, you can just imagine that guy, the ease with which he can befuddle Starmer with a load of fancy flannel. And Sakir's letter is understood to have referred to the need for every government department and regulator to support growth and called on each recipient to submit 5 ideas for delivering that mandate by 16th of January. Regulators are not going to do it. They have no incentive. They're not going to. You can guarantee that Starmer will not have set out any kind of incentive, commission or reward for doing so. He'd have simply said, I want you to do this. No, there's no reason why those regulators would respond to it. I'm not sure there's any reason why they should. But I think it would be a disaster if they do. The letter also urged regulators to identify how government could remove barriers to economic growth and where regulatory objectives were either conflicting or confused. Mr Chandra is said by government insiders to have ruffled feathers in Whitehall since his appointment shortly after Labour's massive general election victory in May. I think the most damning bit is most of Britain's economic regulators already have a growth duty enshrined in their statute, having come into effect in March 2017 under the Deregulation Act of 2 years earlier. So they already have to think about growth and deregulation, and Starmer is simply sending them a letter reminding them of this. That is desperate stuff. They're out of options. And this matters because they cannot let the country go into recession. And the productivity amount that each person produces is so bad it's going down and down and down and down. If they don't do something drastic, what can they do? The only way I think they're going to have is to bring in more and more people. I don't see how else they fill the gap. They can't. They don't have it. There's nothing else they can do as far as I don't know what else they can do apart from sending out silly letters to regulators who probably roll their eyes. And this matters because they want to get elected again, and they're not going to. Well, I don't think they've got a hope. But this story from Sky: Labour would lose almost 200 seats in a highly unstable Parliament if election held today, poll suggests. So under polling that's conducted today, 6 months after the general election, says that far from getting the landslide, Labour would win 228 seats, the Conservatives 222 and Reform 72. The Lib Dems would win 58 seats and the SNP on 37 with the Greens on 2. The Tories would be the highest in terms of national vote at 26% compared to Labour's 25%. So that's Labour polling below the Tories now, the Tories of all people. But this would still be their second worst vote share in history, and they would struggle to come even close to forming a majority government without making gains against Reform on the right or the Lib Dems on the left, Mr Trill said. Now, the reason that matters is because Starmer and the Labour government have set as their overriding objective growth, economic growth. Their mantra has been, quotes, growth, 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 unquote. They keep talking about it, how they're going to grow the economy. You see it in Starmer's Happy New Year's message. Britain's going to come alive. You're going to realise how lucky you are to be British in 2025. You're all going to feel richer in 2025. If you can't deliver on that, if lenders, bondholders start saying the British economy is going down, we're not going to lend anymore, interest rates go up and up and up, everyone's going to feel poorer. That will depress the economy further, or that might reduce inflation. That is going to reduce growth, and then they will get voted out at the next election. So I don't think they can put up with that. So my point is, don't believe Starmer's butch words about reducing immigration. He isn't making a very strong. I don't think he's making any commitment at all that he can be held to there. He's choosing to avoid that because I think he wants to keep his options open on that. What he is doing is making macho noises about how bad the Tories are. I think that is about deflection, misdirection, and the other examples of that are the policy of smashing the gangs, which will have no effect. That is misdirection. That is deflection. And the other one about mass deportations. Yeah, 1% of the total number who came in last year. That is deflection. That is misdirection. And then you have the state of the economy, which it seems to me, I don't know how they're going to if they can't use mass immigration to pad out the numbers, I don't know what they're going to do. So I am not entirely abandoning my rash prediction that whichever government came into power, they would aim for 2 million foreigners coming into this country every year, as was Rishi Sunak's aim. I think we could quite easily hit that. So don't run away with Starmer's nice words. Thank you.